All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Dog People. I am the guest host this week. This is Adam Passion, recording from Nagoya, Japan, and I am here with the regular host. Go ahead and give a shout out, Bob.
What up? It's Bob. It's your boy Bob. Let's go.
And also we have our good friend Hughie Bear, aka is the aka. Or wait, whatever. We got Mike Huguenot here too. But say hi, Mike.
Hello, it is I.
Hi, Mike.
And yeah, that's one of my AKAs.
Yeah, one of your AKAs is AKA. AKA,
Yeah.
AKA.
FKA, AKA.
So today I have something that's sort of similar to what we talked about before, but I wanted to talk about something that I think is sort of in my wheelhouse. So if people don't know, I've been a kind of dilettante cartoonist for most of my life, and I've been really into comic books and manga and things like that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the kind of forays into like the manga world and the connections with the manga world that Ginnan Boyz and Going Steady have.
Okay.
Obviously, I would say the most obvious one would be the cover art from Ginnan Boyz. I don't know if you would call it the first or the second album, but the Kimi to Boku. I'll abbreviate it there.
One of the first albums.
Yeah, one of the first of two. That album art, as you guys probably know, was drawn by Eguchi Hisashi, who drew a famous manga here called Stop Hibari-kun. Do you know that manga?
Yeah.
I don't.
So it's a really weird premise, Mike. The idea is basically that there's this Yakuza boss, and he has only daughters, but he has only daughters, and then he has one son. But this one son is transsexual. Not only is he transsexual, but she is much cuter than all the other sisters and stuff, and like the most popular one. And so this dad loves his daughters and doesn't want to like force them to be different than who they are, but at the same time he can't imagine like this trans woman taking over the syndicate, right? So it's like a weird, goofy manga where there was like that period in the 90s and 80s where that was kind of a running theme, right? Like the gender bending kind of like Ranma and stuff like that.
Yeah, Ranma for sure is what I thought of.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so that comic is what it is, but people really loved the way that he drew women, and he ended up becoming like this kind of fashion illustrator and became really famous for just drawing women. And actually, Hibari-kun in that manga, she's always wearing really cute outfits and stuff, which kind of makes it stand apart from other books where they're always wearing one outfit. But actually, nobody will be able to see this if they're not on this Zoom call, but I bought this weird book called Comic Q a few years ago at this in Jimbocho, which is like the famous book village of Tokyo, where there's just like hundreds of bookstores. Mm-hmm. And this is a really weird, it's from 1995. You can see it's the first issue. And if you look on the side here, it says Eguchi Hisashi, and he's like the special editor of this. And it's like a weird avant-garde manga magazine. And I was reading about this, and it was the idea that they were saying, we want to have a magazine that is disposable, but nobody can get themselves to throw it away. That was like the idea behind it. And by the way, there's a phrase that people use in Japan called tokushu, right? Which means like the special edition kind of thing of a magazine. And this one, every issue from issue 2 was always called tokushu. Like, so they were always the special edition. So mangaka who are in this are all like, now it's got Matsumoto Taiyo, who made like, Tekken Concrete and Ping Pong and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It has Otomo Katsuhiro, who made Akira. And it has like Yoshida Sensha and like all of these people who are really huge names now, both in the mainstream comics world and also the kind of more avant-garde or artistic style manga stuff that you see these guys even now in like Axe, or they used to be in Garo back in the 70s and 80s. So it's a really weird collection. I'm actually surprised that I even found this weird book because it's before a lot of those people broke. So anyway, all that to say, like Eguchi Hisashi he's a kind of commercial success in that he had this big title, but he also has like his roots in the kind of more artsy manga world.
When I was studying Japanese at Foothill, my Japanese professor had some Denny's menus that she had straight up stolen from a Denny's in Japan. And Eguchi Hisashi had done all the art on the menus. They were like the coolest looking menus you've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I have like 2 or 3 Eguchi Hisashi books that I bought at Nikaku when I worked there. And some of the art from the Denny's books is in there. I'll send you some pics. I was like, years later when I got the books, I was like, oh shit, it's the Denny's menu.
Yeah. That's so weird because there's another guy. I don't know if you guys know somebody named Hayashi Seiichi. Mm-mm. He's one of those guys that is like one of the founding kind of fathers of Japanese avant-garde manga. Like he was one of the early Garo guys back in the 60s and 70s. But most people, even here in Japan, don't know his manga. But they all know his drawing of this character from a candy called Koumei-chan. So he drew this weird kind of 3/4 perspective of this woman. You can only see the back of her head and then like her eyelash. But it's this like famous iconic candy wrapper, and that's what everybody knows him for, not his comic work. I wanted to talk about some of the things that Mineta has done like on screen and how that kind of connects. So I think the first one that everybody would know is the film Identity, which came out in 2003.
Yeah.
Or I guess it's written as Iden and Titty, which is kind of what the title song is as well. But that film was based on the manga written by Miura Jun. And Miura Jun is also one of those guys in that same world, that Garo magazine, that hip underground Gekiga.
What era was this? Like the 70s or 80s or something?
Yeah. So Garo was mostly in the 70s. And I think it started in the 60s, but it was mostly through the 70s. And it carried on through the 80s. When it finally did close down, the same company, the same publisher, Seidin Kogeisha, they started a new magazine called Axe. And that's still going to this day. And a lot of the same people are there in it. The older guys who were in Garo are now like either editors or like special edition editors.
Okay.
So, Miura Jun was part of that world, and he's kind of this hip essayist, mangaka, illustrator. He also does music. His wife is kind of popular in that scene as well. And so he's one of those kind of elder statesmen in that kind of scene.
Okay.
But also, the film was directed by somebody named Taguchi Tomorowo. Taguchi Tomorowo is kind of interesting, and he fits Mineta in a really interesting way because he actually was in a punk band called Bachikaburi. So the idea that he decided to create this film, which is about rock and roll singers. Actually, Bob, do you want to tell about the plot of the film?
It's Mineta's character is in a band, the Speedway, right?
Yep, Speedway.
Speedway is kind of like a mid-level indie band, and they see like these bands that they view as posers kind of getting a little more love. And there's this push and pull between Mineta's character and the singer of his band between like staying true to your art or like doing shit that'll make them popular. The general story is just about Mineta's character struggling with like being a scumbag rocker and being famous and hooking up with groupies, or like keeping it real, writing music that means something to him and finding true love.
Yeah.
And in the end, I think he chooses keeping it real.
Right.
Without giving too much away. That's what happens.
I think he chooses keeping it real, but he also like makes really cringy, sappy love songs too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. In my memory of it too, I feel like though it is about like rock and roll and about like a punk band, it has this feel of like a slice of life manga kind of. It feels like kind of muted and kind of like just kind of like impressionistic almost. Just kind of like these little moments a lot of the time.
That's really interesting that you say that, because that's totally how the manga is. Like it's sort of like a diary or something. It's just like this memoir kind of thing. It's basically the story of this musician. It follows the same general story. And it's just interesting to me that Miura Jun himself is a mangaka who is kind of an aspiring musician as well. And he was surrounded in that community of that kind of, artsy community in the 70s and stuff of these other musicians and people like that. And the fact that this director, he was, himself a musician, but actually I did some digging and he was also a cartoonist in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So in 1981, he made a manga series called No Pan Panic, which basically means no pan means not wearing any underwear. So,
Yo, I know something about that, dude. Ever tell you guys this story? There was a famous Mexican pop song in the 80s by this group called Flans, and the song's called No Controles, which is like, don't control me.
yeah.
And but when I was a kid and I would run around naked, my family would be like, no conchones. And that would be my song.
Without your chones. You know what?
With no chonies.
I thought chones was like a standard word for the longest time until I said it to people who are not from California, and they were like, what the hell are you talking about? So that's one of those California slang, the chones. But yeah. So he made this series called No Pan Panic, which came out in 1981, and depends on how you want to define like the metric of success as far as comics go. Like one of the main goals, I think, for people starting out is to get the word lensai, which means like a serialized comic, right? You get into a monthly or a weekly magazine, and that's like that first hurdle where you've established yourself. But then the step beyond that is when you get that tankobon, which is like they've collected your work into a separate volume, because that means that you're not only selling with all these other people, but you're selling on your own name alone.
Okay.
And so that No Pan Panic has one single tankobon that was collected into. So, I mean, he reached a certain level of success, but nobody really knows that comic as far as I know. So it's just interesting that Miura Jun himself and then Taguchi Tomorowo, who directed this film, they all have the triple threat kind of thing going on, right? Like they're all, to varying degrees of success, involved in music, involved in comics, and involved in television or movies. And that includes Mineta in that, right?
Right.
So that's one that I thought was interesting. And I remember that film in particular being really, I went out and bought the DVD. This was back when ordering things from Japan, you paid more in shipping than you paid for the actual thing. And I remember like me and you, Bob, and other people, we would like pool all of our things that we wanted into one order because we didn't want to pay for multiple shipping things, and
Yeah.
we'd split the shipping later. So I remember ordering that DVD, and I was so excited about it because it had original songs written by Mineta in there, and that title track, Identity, I really liked it. It's a kind of a simple, pretty little song.
Identity 裂かれたのさそれをどこで手に入れた誰から
Years later, when I heard them release the song Hikari, I thought it has a really similar kind of melody. Part of it does. Maybe I'm the only one who thought that. But the other thing is that film has Bob Dylan as kind of this like specter who keeps coming and like helping him out. And Bob he doesn't talk in the film. He only plays a harmonica.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was a choice, I think, in the film, because it would be hard to express that in manga. But
In the manga, there is like a Dylan-looking character. Like I think he looks like a little dog or something.
yeah, there definitely is. Yeah. And I think it's definitely supposed to be Dylan. Which is funny because Dylan, I wouldn't call him punk, but especially not later Dylan. But this is something that I always connected in my own head, whether or not it's factually accurate or not, I don't know. But that's about the era where I started hearing Mineta playing harmonica in his own music. And in that song Hikari, there's definitely like really weird, emotional kind of sounding, like almost like it's like shaking and crying kind of harmonica playing. And I always wondered if that film, like having that harmonica around, influenced him in any way.
We referenced this in an earlier episode, but I kind of feel like that was around the era where Mineta was breaking out of the little pop punk bubble. And so he's hanging out with all these people that you've mentioned who have deep roots in kind of like general Tokyo hipsterdom. And so I think that's when he's adding more things to his music because he's being exposed to more influences or just kind of broadening his horizon. So it's like, yeah, I'm not going to write songs that just sound like the Blue Hearts anymore. I'm going to like, oh shit, I like Bob Dylan, I like folk music now. I think that's kind of all part of the same progression.
Yeah, that's probably true. One thing what you just mentioned that and it made me remember is if you remember the very last track on the album Door, there's the song Nantonaku Boku Tachi wa Otoda ni Narunda. And it's him playing like a folk guitar and everybody singing around in this big room, it sounds like. And actually, one of the people in the background who's singing along is Taguchi Tomorowo from this, the director of this film.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's definitely that connection. And that's why I kind of wonder if he was a punk singer and he was in that Tokyo scene that you're talking about, that's probably how they pulled Mineta into this because, you know, it was kind of a natural fit with him being interested in manga and being in the band.
You know, this is what year? Like 2004 that this came out? 2006? I'm trying to remember now.
2005.
2005, yeah. I was right in between. I was getting there. It was coming in.
Yeah, you bookended the year.
Yeah. But like, I don't know how big folk punk was in Japan at the time, you know, but I feel like he was kind of on the like cutting edge a little bit of folk punk at the time, like putting that in a way that wasn't so much a genre, but just kind of like using that element, using folksy, acoustic and harmonica instruments that way.
I used to, the year I lived there, I probably went and saw For Tomorrow like 3 or 4 times. And they had this band open for them at one of their shows. I can't remember what the band was called, but they were clearly like an AJJ knockoff. It was an acoustic guitar and a violin instead of an upright bass. And I remember they had this one song that was Bike Punks, we are the Bike Punks. It was the corniest shit I ever saw. So that's all I could tell you about the state of folk punk in Japan, circa 2009.
They got the Bike Punks. They're doing good.
Yeah, so that film I think has a lot of different ties. You can see that there's a personal kind of connection with Taguchi Tomorowo and with Mineta, and then their connection to Miura Jun. And actually, Taguchi Tomorowo and Miura Jun have written some things together as well. Besides just working on this film, they did something called Bronson nara koyu, and which basically means this is how Bronson would say it. And that one, they're kind of co-writing that one. So yeah, they're kind of got their own creative thing going. In 2010, the film Boyz on the Run, Mineta starred as the lead in that character named Toshiyuki Tanishi. And Tanishi is like a type of Japanese snail. I don't know if it's Japanese, but it's a type of snail that you find in like the rice fields here. A gross little thing. But anyway, yeah, so Boyz on the Run, it's based on a manga by Hanazawa Kengo, who is really, he draws these really nerdy kind of loser characters in all of his stories. So his most famous work most recently was the series I Am a Hero, which I think, Bob, you know.
I followed it for a while.
That became a film, I think, and maybe even a TV series. But I Am a Hero is basically like what happened if a zombie outbreak happened in Japan, right? So you have like the aging population, and you have like the shut-ins, and all these other social problems here. And so like half of the zombies don't have teeth because they're old and they can't really bite you. You know, it's a society without any guns. So you don't have the option of shooting the zombies. You just have to kind of run from them. And then obviously because it affects the people who are always out on the street, the shut-ins who never leave their house are the ones who actually kind of end up saving everybody and like being the ones who are like the communication defense for everything, you know? And so it's a really funny take on the zombie premise. And this one, Boys on the Run, this is the story of a guy who is a designer of those little toys that you get in the capsule machines.
Little vending machines.
Yeah, the little gacha that they call them in Japan. And he's in love with this woman, but, this other guy is kind of sets him up to fail so that he can steal the girl. And so it's the same kind of story of like this loser who's trying to get more than his lot kind of allows him in life and stuff. And it's a really funny, really, really funny series, the comic book itself is. But the movie actually translated a lot of that humor, I felt. Mineta plays a really great, lovable loser.
Like tape on glasses loser.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if this scene ever made it to the movie. I don't remember the movie well enough. But in the comic book, there's a part where he's trying to fight this guy and he accidentally shits his pants. And that's what makes the guy like run away, is because he he like falls on him and shits his pants.
I think that is in the movie.
Is it in the movie? Okay, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I always thought that was a really hilarious premise. That the guy, he finally like wins his fight, but it's not because he's been training all this time. It's because he like shits himself. Yeah.
Any means necessary.
Yeah. There's another series that's not so well known by Hanazawa Kengo, which is this one here called Lusanchiman, and it's this one is actually really prescient in a way because it was written years and years ago, but it's about like VR, like people escaping into these VR worlds before VR was really a thing, and this really kind of almost like a critique on modern Japanese society and stuff, because everybody's just, they're not even like, a lot of it's sexual, but then there's other ones where you can just go into this VR world and be a hero and be somebody that you're not in your real life and stuff. And yeah, his manga is, I can see why it would be really appealing to somebody like Mineta. Not that he's like a lovable loser in any sense, but just that, I don't know, there's like this appeal to,
to freaks.
Yeah, not even freaks, but like people who are not good at expressing feelings in a certain way or something, I guess. I don't know. It's hard for me to put it together, but yeah.
All of them sound kind of like a more emotionally raw take than you normally kind of get. Situation like the guy shitting himself in the middle of a fight. Normally that would be written out or wouldn't be shown at all, know. But like, I think like the rawness is something that is like just so much of the music and like all the art that he loves, and or at least a lot of it.
Yeah. So this film was directed by somebody named Miura Daisuke, and I thought, maybe he's related to Miura Jun in some way, but I don't think that he is. But Miura Daisuke is in the same production company as Taguchi Tomorowo. It's a company called MASH. And so there is that connection as well. I always wondered how it was that this role became available for somebody like Mineta, because this one, unlike the other film, it doesn't really have anything to do with music at all. Even though, despite that, I think that Mineta fits it perfectly. Like, he plays that character really well. But I think maybe there might be that connection because Taguchi Tomorowo knows the director Miura Daisuke, through their production company. That could be the connection. I don't really know how that role ever got offered to him. But
part of me always thought that maybe Mineta was just a big fan of the comic, and somehow that forced Fate's hand a little bit more to like, you're going to be in the role, because maybe he's already made some sort of overture to the author or someone who could make it happen. Yeah,
that's entirely possible. Mike, were you there when we stayed at Mineta's apartment?
No, Angelina was. I wasn't there, but I've heard about it.
I don't even remember what the circumstances were. I just remember that he invited us to come over and hang out at his place. And it wasn't at all what you would expect a rock and roll singer's house to look like. It was what you'd expect a shut-in's house to look like, sort of. Like, it was I mean, I honestly was worried that the floor would collapse out, because he just had bookshelves and bookshelves. Like, the whole place was just floor to ceiling covered in books, and a lot of them were manga, some of them were books about music and stuff. And then on the other side of the room, he had just tons and tons of records. So it was like him just nerding out about these two things, and you could tell that those are like things that really matter to him, was comic books and music. And I remember he lent me some books at the time. So there was a manga series. Hold on, actually, I'm going to grab it for you.
I like the idea that he lent it and you never gave it back.
Yeah. That's my style. Yeah, so, Inachu Takyubu, the ping pong club Do you guys know that one?
A little bit. I've never read it, but I've seen it.
Yeah, so that's by this guy Furutani Minoru, I think is how you read that. And there was a series going on at that time called Shigatera. It's not as funny as Inachi Takyubu, but yeah, Mineta lent it to me and he's like, you've got to read this, you're gonna love it. And to be honest, I didn't really see what the appeal was that he liked so much. But that one is also about, if I remember correctly, I think it's about like a guy who works at like a conveni and he's just like this loser kind of character.
You're a loser. You'll love this shit.
Yeah, he's like, you're going to love this. Yeah. So I may be getting that confused because there's this other, the one I'm holding right now, Wani Tokagigisu, which is another series, which is, he has a bunch of series about kind of lovable loser kind of people. Well, actually, not even lovable losers, actually kind of despicable losers in his comics. Anyway, I just say that to make the point that I think that manga is something that really matters to him. And we mentioned in other ones where he talks about, anime and stuff that he was influenced by as a kid and things like that. So these are just weird little offshoot projects that didn't really have to do with the band so much, other than the fact that similar to him writing original music for Identity, he also wrote the theme song for Boyz on the Run. And that one actually showed up on one of their albums, right? So I always wonder if that's something that he offered to do, or if it's something that they asked him to do, or if it was like the way that Keanu Reeves would only appear in movies if Dogstar could be on the on the soundtrack. I don't know, like that's in his rider or something. This guy, Miura Daisuke, who directed the film Boyz on the Run, he's actually more connected to the theater world. He's a playwright, and he's really involved in a lot of theater, which after Ginnan Boyz sort of broke up, before Mineta started showing so much up on TV, he was doing a lot of theater. I think that could have been really influential as well. I mean, there was that album that Ginnan Boyz put out that was all just the soundtrack to a weird stage play that they did.
I think this is stuff you might bring up on your own, but the Dote So Young CD cover was drawn by a manga artist. I'm not familiar with any of his work. I just know I've seen it otherwhere. I've seen his style other places. What's that dude's deal? Do you know?
The cover art from the album Dote So Young, that was done by a manga artist named Koizumi Tomohiro, and he's actually part of that whole. He was published by Seiden Kogeisha as well, which is the publisher who made Garo and Axe and all the other stuff too. So yeah,
interesting.
So there's that connection.
Same scene.
Yep, same scene. Yeah. So and that scene, I mean, that is the scene I think for like kind of artsy avant-garde manga. Like everybody is influenced by that, and that not only here in Japan, but I think when people talk about like Japanese avant-garde or gekiga, right? Like people like Tatsumi Yoshihiro and people like that, they're all part of that scene. Even like Mizuki Shigeru, who made
Gegege no Kitaro and stuff.
Yeah, Gegege no Kitaro. He was publishing a lot of his stuff in Garo and things like that as well. So that is like the heart and soul of Japanese independent or art focused manga for sure.
Adam, at the beginning of the episode, you called yourself a comics dilettante. But I feel like seeing you participating in the greater comic scene, I've kind of been able to vicariously see what other scenes are like outside of my little music scene bubble. And I love seeing that it's kind of the same thing. Like you might be a small player, but bigger players. And it's kind of all still one community where like the same way I see with like my friends who've kind of quote unquote made it. I still see like, oh, this is where they came from. They still have these connections. They're still listening to the new up and coming bands. Like, and I think it's so cool to see that paralleled in other scenes. Like, I even see it in like food or like film, whatever. Like there's definitely communities, and it's I think from the outside it seems like something so opaque. Like how do you break into that? How do these people meet each other? And then once you're involved, for me, like music doesn't seem like so weird. I'm like, I'm just a scenester. Like I just know people, and it's not because I'm hot shit or anything. It's just like I feel like it's cool to see that with other scenes like as well. Like, and Mineta somehow got his foot into that comics scene, it seems like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It seems super surreal to me sometimes, like when I'll pick up, like, for example, Comic Beam, which is a monthly magazine here, and I'm reading through it. I'm like, oh, this is my friend so and so who has a strip this week and this month. And
yeah, that's tight.
It's weird. It's weird to like kind of know people who are actually out there doing that. And I think it must be the similar thing with you when you have these friends who are. It seems sort of surreal to have friends that are on that level, even though you don't feel like that when you're interacting with them, right?
I mean, we're recording a podcast here Friday night on midnight, and Mike was just on TV a week ago. Like,
yeah,
you go from someone who was on TV to like back to our normal mundane existence.
And even to me, it doesn't really feel like anything has changed exactly. Like it was a great experience, and I'm really happy it happened. But it's not like you suddenly go through some doorway and are a different place or anything like that. It's really more, like you're saying, you're kind of coming from a scene, or you're coming from an area, and usually it's just people who are trying to do something because they love music and they want to do it, and they're finding the other people who also love it and are just trying to make it happen one way or the other. And those people all come from a place, and they tend to all grow together.
Yeah, that actually is something that I was talking, about on the episode when we were talking to Chin, is that like, that everybody's connected in these ways, and you never know where their career is going to go from that point. Like, for example, it's the 35-year anniversary of Mario, and they're like slamming that hard on the TV here and pushing it. And the commercials that they have here in Japan has Hoshino Gen playing music while Mario's like running around the room. If you had asked me 20 years ago, that guy was just like one of those homies kicking back with Chin and all the other guys, like making weird music. So
yeah, it's cool.
It's super weird.
After you mentioned Hoshino Gen in that episode, I have Hoshino Gen's first solo album on vinyl. I think Fusa gave it to me as a present or something. Okay. And I was just like, oh, Hoshino Gen's famous. I'm like, I wonder if this record's worth anything. And I looked it up, and it's I have a pressing from Kakuba Rhythm, but apparently the record was later like licensed and re-released by whatever major label he's on now. And so I saw fools selling the major label version for $1,000 on Discogs. And I was like, damn, I have the Kakuba Rhythm one, and I've listened to it once. Like, it didn't really blow my mind, but I was like, oh shit, maybe I should flip this record for some money. like now that Homeboy's hella, and he's on Netflix. He has a Netflix special. I was like, damn, fool's way bigger than I thought he was.
Oh yeah, he's huge here. He's huge, and out of those like young blood dudes who are coming up now in the Japanese scene, like Yonezu Kenshi and stuff like that, like he's totally right there at the forefront of that. So.
Yeah.
I guess that brings it back to what we're talking about, like the comic scene and stuff. Yeah, like everybody plays their part, and everybody, whatever part it is that you play, like it's all part of this greater thing of just creative people hanging out and trying to make something beautiful. So
right.
I've actually even thought that would be a way for me to bridge a conversation with Mineta, was like not through music, but through comics. Because I have this big festival that I organize once a year in Tokyo, and we have some pretty big guests who come and do stuff there, including one guy who actually has done a whole bunch of work for UK project bands.
Oh, tight.
He does like all their posters and stuff like that. An artist named Kaneko Atsushi. And so I've always thought like, oh, maybe there's this other angle that I could approach hanging out with Mineta again, because it would almost seem more genuine, because I'm not coming at him as a fan in that case. I'm coming at him as, a fellow dude who's interested in comics.
A fellow nerd.
Yeah, a fellow comics nerd.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Plus, you need to give him back those comics you borrowed. It's been fucking 10 years.
That's the end for the conversation. Just call me like, hey, dude. Sorry,
I'm ready to give it back to you now.
I'm really slow at reading Japanese, man. It took me 10 years to get through this 3-volume series.
A lot of kanji in these books. You gotta look them each up.
Dude, okay, so you mentioned earlier how these artists ran in the same scene and were published in that magazine along with Otomo Katsuhiro. And I this is something I've been wanting to talk with you about, Adam, as someone who, like, you live in Japan, you speak Japanese like pretty dang good. You have a really good accent for an American. And I'll bleep the name out when we actually edit this episode, but do you know our friend?
Yeah, I know him through the scene. I don't think we've ever interacted personally.
I have this memory of it's like got under my skin, and it's like it's still there to this day, where he was talking about the movie Akira, or you could say Akira, whatever. But he was trying to say it like that in a way that like really annoyed me, in a way where I'm just like, it's cool if you just say Akira. He would be like, he's like, yeah, we're going to do a special screening of Akira at the movie theater. You can just say Akira. It's cool, man. Like, and that drives me crazy. Like if I'm playing Street Fighter with someone, I don't want to hear them like butcher Ryu's name, trying to like say it more Japanese, like Ryu or whatever. Like, you can just say Ryu, man. We're in America. Like, this is just how we say it. Like,
yeah. Like when people say like karate in America.
Yeah. The one that always bothers me is when you hear people like arguing over the pronunciation. They're like Hiroshima, and like, no, it's Hiroshima, and it's like, man, both you fools are wrong and right at the same time. Like, just imagine that on the other side, if you heard like two Japanese people arguing about how you're supposed to pronounce San Francisco, and it's like, it's not San Francisco, it's San Francisco, and it's like, man, who gives a shit? Like,
yeah, totally. It's so inconsequential. Yeah, there's no like stress, right? There's no particular like saying it, putting the emphasis on one particular syllable doesn't change the word at all. It's not more correct than the other.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I've heard people having that similar kind of like pedantic argument in Japanese, like about English pronunciation. They're like, they're talking about when to say the and when to say the. And they're like saying these strict rules like, oh, you have to say the in this type of situation. It's like, no, you don't. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
So that was another episode of Dog People, talking about the strange connections between manga, music, stage, and screen. Join us again for our episode next time, where we talk about something probably even deeper and weirder and more obtuse. Thanks again, guys.
All right. Peace.
See ya.
Later.
Thanks for listening to Dog People. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at DogPeople666, where we'll be posting supplemental photos and such for each episode. If you like what we're doing here, help us spread the word by sharing the show with a friend or two. Also, check out Adam's other podcast, Searching for Grog, wherein three brothers try to reconstruct their childhood memories of a road trip involving sledding accidents, freak hailstorms, confessions of love, and an arcade game about cavemen playing golf. Shout out to some of our other favorite music podcasts out there. Better yet, a long-form interview podcast covering the best artists from the extended DIY punk community. Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, and As You Were, a podcast about Alkaline Trio, both of which inspired us to do something similar, and the In Defense of Ska podcast by our old friend Aaron Carnes.